Hey friends, we are looking at the voice leading packet. The first chorale that you're asked to look at is one that's already done. The voice leading is already done, and you need to find the errors. So I'm just going to show you a couple ways you can, the way that you can label those errors. Okay. Now, the first thing I might want to check for is to make sure that all the chords in this are spelled correctly. A spelling error is going to be a big deal. So you want to make sure, and the reason that I'm having you do this is because when you do your voice leading, when you write one of these, you need to look at it and check for errors, check for these errors. So make sure everything's spelled correctly. So I'm just going to go through here. Key of A 1 is an ACE. A 4 is count up A, B, C, D as a DFA. So it's helpful if you can talk in thirds and just spell these chords pretty quickly. 2 is a BDF. 5, A, B, C, D, E, E, G, B. Another quick way to find the fifth of the key is look at the tonic triad and find the fifth. Okay, so that's an E, G, B. 1, 6 is an ACE with the C in the bass. By the way, this... Oh, that's a 5-7. Sorry, I'm missing a note on that. Since this is a 5-7, I need an EGBD. ACE, the 4 is over here, so if you have a repeated chord, you can just look back. DFA. And 7 is a GBD. B should be in the bass. And an ACE. Okay, so if I just check that really quick, I'm also going to check what they doubled. What was doubled in these chords that they spelled. So ACE, I've got A, C, E. Good. DFA, I've got the DFA. Now this is sticking out at me right here that they doubled that F. Okay, in a root position, you should double the bass. So I'm going to just mark that as an error. By circling that, and I'm just going to write up here. Doubling. Okay, so I found an error. Improper doubling. BDF. Going on to the next chord here. D in the bass, and B, it's the D is doubled. I've got a B, a D, and an F. Okay, so spelled correctly with the bass doubled. On a first inversion, you could also double the soprano, but this is totally acceptable. Now on my 7th chord, E, G, B, D, E, G, B, D. Good. ACE with C in the bass. There's the C in the bass. The bass is doubled. And I've got ACE. Good. DFA, D, bass is doubled, FA. We're good. GBD with B in the bass. Now on a diminished triad, if this is a diminished triad, you need to double the bass because the other two notes, the G and the D, are part of an unstable interval. They're part of a diminished fifth. And if you double either of those, well, one of them is the leading tone of the key. The G is the leading tone of the key. So you can't double that already. That would be bad. And if you doubled the D, that's also a member of that unstable interval. And that sounds gross. So you have to double the B on the bass, which in this case we did in the soprano. So there's a G and a D to complete that triad. It's spelled correctly. ACE in the last chord, A doubled in the alto with a C and an E. We are good. So the only thing we found there was an improper doubling. Everything else is spelled correctly. I'm going to go on and look at a couple things in individual lines. So I'm just going to glance and see what the ranges are of the 4 parts. Soprano goes from an E up to a C. That's well within the soprano range. Alto from a C to an A. Perfect. Tenor from the A to an E. We're good. And the bass goes from an A up to an E. We're just fine with range then. And I'll also look at spacing. While I'm just doing this cursory glance, I can just look at spacing between the alto and the soprano. The farthest they ever get away from each other is a 4th right there. 4th right there. Okay, so those are perfectly acceptable. Look between now the the alto and the tenor, and they don't ever get very far away either. It's like maybe here from this D to G, and that's a 4th. You know, nothing very far there. That's a little bit harder to spot because you're on 2 different clefs there. This one actually is a 6th from that A to that F, but still less than an octave, so we're safe. Okay. Another thing that I would want to look at then would be leading tones and chordal 7ths, anything that's a tendency tone, something that needs to resolve a specific way. You need to make sure that it's resolving that specific way. So leading tone in this key would be the G sharp. I'm just going to look across this line here in the treble clef. It's not really on the line. And see what G's I have. Okay, so here's a G in the soprano, and it goes up to A, so that is the correct resolution of that note. Here's a G in the alto, which goes up to A, so that is the correct resolution. Then I'm looking in the bass clef at this G space right here, and there are no G's in the bass clef. You could look also at the bottom line, make sure there's no notes on that one, and there's nothing higher than that. Okay, so all the G's in this song resolve up. So that is correct, no problems there. I also want to look at voice crossing, voice overlap. Okay, you may have noticed it already when we went up with that alto to double the F sharp with the soprano and did that improper doubling. We took it up higher than the soprano's previous note of an E. Okay, so I'm also going to just keep that same circle, but label this as a voice overlap. Okay. Then I'm going to take a moment and look for parallel motion. This is something that you need to check on every chord that you write. Check for parallel motion. So first of all, I need to identify what parallel motion there is, and then if there are fifths or octaves, then I need to label those as mistakes. So first 2 chords, I've got stepping up, leaping up, staying the same, and leaping up. So my alto leaps up a 4th, and my bass leaps up a 4th. So those are parallel. Those are in parallel motion, which in and of itself is not a bad thing. Just if it's the wrong interval, then that's a bad thing. So our interval here is going from an A to a C. Excuse me. A to a C, which I know is a third. So parallel thirds are acceptable. I don't need to mark that as an error. Okay, then I'm going to look at my next 2 chords. I've got soprano staying the same, alto jumping down, tenor stepping up, and bass staying the same. No parallel motion I have to worry about there. Now, if 2 voices stay the same, that's okay. It's not motion. Okay, it's not parallel motion because it's not motion. Soprano stepping up, alto staying the same, tenor staying the same, bass stepping up. So I've got parallel motion between my soprano and my bass. What's the interval? I've got a D and an F. That is a third. So we are safe. Parallel thirds are okay. The things we have to worry about is parallel fifths, parallel octaves, and actually parallel unisons are also bad. I didn't put that on this instruction sheet, but you don't usually see them. Okay, next chord, I've got stepping up, stepping up, stepping up. So lots of parallel motion going on. Let's check those intervals. I've got a fourth between the soprano and the alto, and I've got a B there, sixth between the soprano and the tenor, and a third between the alto and the tenor. So those are all acceptable parallel intervals. Fourth, not as desirable as a third or a sixth, but it's still acceptable. Next chords, I've got staying the same, stepping up, stepping up, stepping up. So lots of parallel motion on the stepping ups. What are the intervals between the alto and the tenor? I've got a third, that's acceptable. Between the alto and the bass, I've got a third, that's acceptable. But if I've got the same interval between the alto and the tenor as I do between the alto and the bass, that means the tenor and the bass are probably an octave, which they are. So they're both stepping up. I've got an octave going to an octave. That's called parallel octaves. And that is not acceptable. So I'm going to just mark it like that with two lines with a P8 in between them. And that shows that I've got parallel octaves there. Next chord, I've got parallel thirds in the soprano and the alto, and no other parallel motion. Next chord, parallel thirds between the soprano and the alto. The tenor is also parallel with them, which in this case looks like it's probably a good thing where the bass is stepping down, that the other voices are going in contrary motion to the bass. So they are avoiding the parallel octave with the bass that we had in the previous chord over there. The previous measure, rather. So let's see what intervals I have there. Between the soprano and the tenor is a sixth, so that's safe. Between the alto and the tenor is a fourth, so we're okay on that one. So the only parallel motion I found there was that parallel octave. And I've got one doubling error, a voice overlap. Overall, this actually would get a pretty good score. Oh, one other thing I didn't check, sorry. I checked my leading tones, but I didn't check chordal seventh. In this 5/7 chord, that D needs to go down. And in this chord, the D here is actually going up. So I'm just going to circle that note and just label that as a seventh. So I know what you're talking about if you just circle a note and say seventh. Maybe even just put a seventh down arrow. Missed that one. Should have checked that when I checked the leading tones. Sorry about that. So that's how you do this first one on this assignment, finding the errors. It's a skill that you'll want to have to be able to just go through when you do your voice leading, and really it's easier as you do it to find those things. Just beware of what all those conventions are and be able to spot them so that you can fix them.